Oh, hi guys. Hey, sorry about that. I was just a little distracted. I was just catching up on the latest gossip and, the reality TV show that apparently has overcome the ex-Scientology community. But that's fine. That is just whatever it is. So, hey, listen, thanks for stopping by. I'm Mitch Brisker. This is Scientology The Big Lie. I've got an interesting chapter reading for you from the book Scientology The Big Lie. So stick around. Whoops. There.
If you fail to understand, then the same incredible terror that's menacing me will strike at you!
So a big welcome to all of you from LA. Thanks for stopping by. Unfortunately, it's been the Smoky City. I just can't even, it's just so tragic what's going on out there. Hopefully this is gonna, we're all on pins and needles because the wind is picking up and, wow. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I happen to be in a part of LA. I'm sort of halfway in between the Eden fire and the Palisades fire. Interestingly enough, I almost moved. Y'all remember I was like moving my residence, and I like was going to move into a place that was literally two blocks from where the Eden fire started, and I'm sure that's all gone. I'm glad I didn't move there, but nearly happened. So many places that I have so many memories associated with have burned down, and it's really tragic. And my heart goes out to the people. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into this chapter here. This is a relatively short. This is going to be a short reading. I'm going to come back later with another interesting story that I've kind of been overlooked lately, and I would like to relate to you guys. But this is a kind of I read or reread this chapter, and I'm like, why is this story important? Well, it's so inside baseball because it has to do with the Dianetics campaign back in the, I don't know, maybe 2009 or 2008. But let's check that. But it definitely focuses on the sort of weird racial biases that Scientology has. So this is chapter 16, and it's titled Dianetics Separate But Equal. That title, Separate But Equal, comes from the Jim Crow idea of having separate services, separate access to whatever. As in the South, the same for blacks and whites. It was a kind of a justification for or segregation was separate but equal, which is, you'll see why I named this chapter Dianetics Separate But Equal. So here we go. In the mid 2000s, I wrote and directed for the third time. That's a story in its own. A 4-hour instructional video titled How to Use Dianetics. Around that same time, there was an intense interest in growing Scientology's Black membership, with new churches planned to open in Harlem and Inglewood, predominantly Black neighborhoods. Pointing out that the media produced by the church was overwhelmingly white, Miscavige wanted an identical version of the video produced featuring Black actors, specifically aimed at the Black community. So, in other words, he wanted Dianetics for white people and Dianetics for Black people. Like something out of Jim Crow America with its infamous segregated drinking fountains, he wanted a, excuse me, smoky here, a separate but equal Black version of the video, conforming to Scientology's obsession with abbreviations. The African American Dianetics film became known as AFAM, in spite of feeling uncomfortable with the process of directing a Black-centric version. I went along with it. For me, the biggest challenge in creating the AFAM version was defining a visual approach that accurately reflected Black American culture. As no ethnic culture in America is monolithic, the design of the film would center on the video's target demographic, upwardly mobile urban Blacks. The approach to production design at Gold followed Hubbard's cookie-cutter mentality as directed by the Cine-Ds, executive directives he'd written on the subject, a woefully incomplete compendium of snippets stitched together from various texts on color, costumes, lighting, and set design, supplemented by notable textbooks interpreted through the distorted lens of Hubbard's definition of art, a definition which, in and of itself, is one of the best examples of Hubbard's circular reductionist thinking. As Hubbard defined it, art is a word which summarizes the quality of communication. While telling you nothing about art, that definition established Hubbard as the ultimate arbiter of taste among his acolytes. The impulse to create art originates in the human mind. Hubbard claimed to have a greater understanding of the mind than anyone in history. So, with his writings on art, he sought to establish himself as a preeminent thought leader in the field of art. Yet, despite his spreading that wisdom around, directing much of it at his top echelon creators, the art department of Gold produced mediocre work at best. By providing specific examples taken from paintings, architecture, and other films, I was able to wrangle them into executing acceptable designs. I honestly believe that with enough patience, I could help the art department to evolve to the point where they could contribute original ideas and not just follow instructions. In the case of the AFAM video, I insisted we hire an outside production designer who understood Black culture in America, pointing out the educational value of having an established feature film production designer work with the art department. The expensive hire was approved. A talented Black production designer who had substantial credits on well-reviewed popular films. I loathed the prospect of shooting the same film over again, not just because I'd already done it, but the fact that it is being reshot with a primarily Black cast made it obvious Scientology was pandering to Black Americans. In spite of that, and in light of the film having a top-level production designer in the final analysis, the AFM version was superior to the original version. And with that, I had the blessing to continue hiring outside production designers to work on Gold films, which had been a hard-won objective. I thought I'd finally solved the problem of being limited to working with an art department hampered by the constraints of Hubbard's reductionist thinking on art. Shortly after the film was completed, a key member of the art department went missing. Demanding to know what happened to her, I was informed she had blown, the Scientology term for leaving without authorization. Soon after, I was told the production designer soon after I was told the production designer I hired to help with the AFM video was no longer qualified to work for the church. I'm thinking, she blows, he's not qualified. I wonder what happened. Years later, I found out she'd escaped Gold to be with that production designer, had gotten pregnant, and moved back to her home country. While visiting friends who'd worked with her during that time in the Sea Org, I noticed a photo on their refrigerator. It was the girl from the art department standing next to her young son, both of them smiling for the camera. I was happy to see she'd found a fulfilling life outside the Sea Org. By the time the AFM video was completed, it had become obvious that having a separate but equal version of the Dianetics video only served to illustrate how out of step the Church of Scientology was with contemporary culture. The Black version of the How to Use Dianetics video was never released internally. It was a complete disaster, a waste of time and money. Had the general public ever become aware of the two versions, one for whites and another for Blacks, they would have clearly seen Scientology's racist attitude. So yeah, that was a pretty amazing. Yeah, I didn't really mention. I'm not going to mention the guy's name, but was a production designer on the first Underworld film, which I really liked the film a lot, and I remember interviewing the guy and asking him what his rationale was behind the designs for that film. And when he told me, I was like, yeah, I want to work with you. This guy was really brilliant. Unfortunately, he became attracted to, he and one of the female Sea Org members had what we call out 2D, 2D being, the part of one's existence that deals with sex and family. And she left. I mean, it was really unfortunate. It kind of messed with my plans to hire outside people because that happened. So, but Scientology did continue on, uh, trying to recruit more Black folks, and they didn't end up with NOI. Here's a piece of mail I got, I think last summer, before they completely stopped sending me mail. Yeah, here he is, Tony Muhammad, proudly showing off his certificate for having completed OT2. Yeah, this is just a little promo. Look at this. Fly to new heights, do the solo auditor course. The world needs more OTs. There's a gal, she looks like she's about my age. Because probably the only person they could dig up who'd done the solo course. And anyway, this is just a bunch of stuff. But so their efforts did end up, with no help, obviously, to the African American Dianetics film, because it was never released. And by the way, interesting fact, I was involved in two of these sort of Dianetics, videos, long form, very expensive, that never got released. The other one we'll talk about sometime, starring Grant Cardone. I mean, that's how he got started in his, being known as. I mean, he's already a Scientologist, but he got cast to be a spokesperson in a Dianetics infomercial, which is also how he met his wife. So we're going to talk about that sometime, because that thing turned out to be an utter disaster. The church wasted millions of dollars on it. Grant scooted away kind of scot-free. And oh, look, somebody showed up. No. Hey, hello, Miss Amber Sunshine. Thanks for being here. So let me see, what else did I want to tell you about this? So yeah, but that's a whole other thing. I've never really done any content on Grant, but I got to know him pretty well when we shot that Dianetics video. And I have lots of things to say about him. C.O. Bill says, let's get Farrakhan and Dougie Fresh. Is my Long Island retired cop uncle's idea of how to appeal to black people. Yeah, there you go. They used to have this thing at Celebrity Center. They don't do it anymore. It was called the Gala. And they'd invite all the celebrities, and then they'd invite a bunch of dignitaries and so forth. That's one of the places where our current mayor Karen Bass, once spoke, which she then had to walk back during the election because her opponent, what's his name, Caruso, who's a creep. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they're both creeps, but he was really a creep. He's like a billionaire who's trying to take over Los Angeles. And the thing that I object to him is that he sort of, the way that the cities where he builds things, like the Grove, he built the Americana in Glendale. Basically, he gets the cities to put up bond measures. I know this is a rabbit hole, but he gets the cities to put up bond measures. So taxpayers, end up paying hundreds of millions of dollars to build these lavish, huge developments, these shopping centers and apartments. And he promises the city tax, an increase in tax income, and I promise them they'll hire a couple of thousand additional cops, and they'll provide some low-income housing. So then he gets to get rich off. He's one of these guys, one of these billionaires getting rich off of taxpayers. And he tried to run for money for mayor of LA, and he very laughably turned the race into a contest of who hated Scientology more, he or Karen Bass. Unfortunately, Karen Bass is kind of sucking at putting people at ease during this disaster. So we'll see how she makes out on the whole thing. So, but speaking of the fire and our governor, Gavin Newsom, who I don't have much against, but I'm like, he's done some good things, and this is like, here he is. This is before he was married to what's her name, Guilfoyle, or maybe they just dated. I don't remember if they're married or not, but at one point he was dating, back in 2006, he was dating Sophia Milas. She was a Scientologist then. I think she's left, but she was, a star on Miami, CSI Miami. And I didn't even know about this from the press. I saw them. I went to some CCHR benefit dinner, and she brought him, and it was like, anyway, I was like, whoa, I had no idea. And Sophia is like, she's probably gone from Scientology. There's no reason to really call her out for being a Scientologist, but she was at that time, and she was dating Gavin Newsom. I don't think that makes Gavin Newsom any kind of an ally. Any kind of an ally of Scientology, not like our potential future Attorney General, Pam Bondi, who's absolutely an ally of Scientology. So let me see. Victor, I like putting this up without reading them first. Victor Roberts says, look at Newsom's face and ask, do you give a F? He says no. Yeah, something like that. Um, now, I don't think Newsom's a bad guy. I think he's tragically good looking to the point where nobody will trust him because he's just comes off a little slick. But I think he's been a relatively successful politician, and he has a beautiful wife who's a documentary filmmaker, and he has a family, and I think he's done some good things in California. My main objection is that he's one of these establishment Democrats who is kind of very much in the pocket of the billionaire elite class. Oh, I missed this one. Paralyzed says, 6-year-old OTH listening to Jay-Z, the blueprint to get the same mental wavelength ended up with the NAI. Hashtag wrong target. Huh. I wish you'd kind of break that down. I'm not fully understanding that. 60-year-old OTH, I got that. Listening to Jay-Z, okay. It makes sense. The blueprint to get on the same mental wavelength ended with the NOI. Huh. I thought the wavelength that got the NOI was a Baptist minister and Scientology turned Scientology OT, Freddie Johnson, who was part of a grift to sign up high school athletes in LA in the inner city to the PURIF and then get reimbursed by Medicare. So he's a little bit of a grifter. I mean, I think he's the one that brought the NOI in, and I think the NOI came in because their top leadership, like Farrakhan and this dude, um, Tony Mohammed, they saw an opportunity to make a lot of money because in Scientology, you bring people in, you will forever, you are forever eligible to receive 10% of everything they spend. So, the top leadership at NOI got hundreds and hundreds of NOI followers into Scientology, and they must have collected a really good payday for that. And I think it's for them, because they all say, well, we're not Scientologists, it's just Dianetics. And then Tony Mohammed turns, he's showing up as OT2 thing, right? Yeah, okay. So C.O. Bill says Newsom looks like he showed up underdressed and had to borrow one of Dave's metallic blue suits. Yeah, how about that? Let me look at. Yeah, that's a little too showy for Dave. Dave's a little more conservative than that. Dave, if there's a book called Closing the Man, and if it's not in that book, Dave's not going to wear it because that's his Bible. Okay, here we go. Here's an explanation from Paralyzed to Paralyzed. The blueprint is a Jay-Z. Oh, I got it. The blueprint is a Jay-Z record. OTs at my org were listening to that back in the early 2000s to pull in the Black community. Your explanation is the reality. Oh, I get it. So there was like this kind of mental effort on the part of the OTs. So like if they listened to Jay-Z, they thought they could conjure more of the Black population to come into Scientology. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, they could sort of what's the word? They could kind of I guess conjure. I guess they could perform some kind of OT magic. Well, like the promo said, we need more OTs. It's right there, man. The world needs more OTs. There it is. What does that say? OT3 has brought out an awareness and power that has made a huge difference in my universe. Everything is different. Yeah, no shit. Yeah, those of you who may not be familiar with it, the Nation of Islam is a highly anti-Semitic group. They're Holocaust deniers. They blamed 911 on the Jews, and they blamed the Jews for inventing the African slave traffic. So there you go. I wonder, are the notifications working? Because everybody's like showing up after I finish reading the chapter. Anyway, hopefully you'll go back and listen to the chapter because it's a very interesting chapter. I mean, Yeah, I mean, the people like everybody involved in the story, nobody's in Scientology anymore. Like me, the art director, he never was in Scientology. The woman that he got the Sea Org member, he got pregnant, who blew, and then got pregnant and then moved back to Italy. They didn't end up together. He ended up going back to his wife. He had a wife and a couple of kids. But and then the people, there was a couple who was very close friends with me and my family, longtime Scientologists. They're gone. They're absolutely got out of Scientology, and they were professionals, like, so they were hired like me. We were like this, there was this little group of us, were hired to work. And so because we would see each other working for them, we kind of became really good friends. Uh, because we were such a weird little group. We weren't public, we weren't really Sea Org, we weren't. It was very strange. We had nobody to hang out with each other anyway. They were in design and architecture. The woman had, I think, she did the interiors for John Travolta's home in Florida, and they used to design. She used to design orgs, and then when they went with the ideal org problem, they got a huge architectural firm to take over that work. Uh, but I was over at their house one day. I had forgotten all about this. This woman, this Italian girl who was in the Sea Org, who'd blown. Uh, months, maybe it was a year later, I was in their kitchen. And I looked at their fridge and I saw this photo of her. And I didn't even know that they knew her, but before she worked for the art department at Gold, she was in the architect's office, which, was involved in ideal orgs and, building and stuff like it sounds. And, they knew her from her work at the architect's office. She used to come to their house and help them with stuff, like get plans finished and blah, blah, blah. She would come to their office in LA. So I had no idea that Nora, and they filled me in on the story. They're like, yeah, she left, she blew, she got pregnant, she has a kid, and the kid was beautiful. She's a very good looking woman. And the kid looked like the two of them. He was a really good looking guy. And it was really, like, I was really stunned. I mean, I was always, as much as I believe in Scientology, I never believed in that there should be an organization called the Sea Org. I thought the Sea Org if Scientology was going to survive, they'd have to get rid of it. They would just literally, you couldn't have an organization sitting on top of that kind of some of the philosophical ideas of Scientology that seemed to me at the time positive, which I later discovered they're not. I was never really on board. So when, friends of mine who were in the circle would leave, I'm like, yeah, they just want to have a life. Like, it was never, they weren't per se, automatically my enemies. I've spoke to him about it. When Mike Rinder blew, I would watch the whole thing happen. I heard Dave say the stuff he said about Mike. He can just go out on the streets of London and, you know, I can't say it on YouTube, but perform a certain type of sexual act on other men for money. He could do that, or he could go to St. Hill and beg for a job. I mean, I'd hear all this stuff, and, like, when Mark and Claire blew, they were good friends of me, and I just was kind of like, secretly inside of me, I'm like, please go away and just be quiet, because I really like you guys, and you don't want to be here. That's totally fine. So anyway, it doesn't matter now because unfortunately Mike's gone. I didn't get to see him in person. We spoke a lot after I left because we'd worked together a lot, not in the OSA stuff, but before that. I never worked with him when he was working with OSA. Well, wait, that's not totally true. Um, we did work a little bit on the Industry of Death Museum, and then he disappeared. And then I had to take the whole thing over. And then I got really pissed off at him for dumping it on my lap. But okay, he was in the hole and I didn't know about the hole. So I thought he dumped that job on me. But in fact, he'd been imprisoned and wasn't able to show up. So anyway, so that's the deal. Hey, do you guys have any questions about any of this stuff, or any kind of questions at all? I am going to be back. One thing I want to, I'm going to be back hopefully later tonight. I have an interesting little story I want to do, but in the meantime, if anybody has any questions, please let me know. What was I going to say? Yeah, speaking of CCHR, it comes up a lot that I was in charge of the museum and I designed it and I did all that stuff. And I have a really intimate knowledge with exactly. I estimate that around 10% of what's in the museum is pretty accurate, and then 90% is just absolute lies and propaganda, and just weird, twisted facts. And I have there's I'd like to know if people would like to see more content on that, because I've done some. There's an online tour of the museum, and I've gone through part of it and explained to people. And I'm thinking maybe a lot of people didn't see it, and I should possibly do that again. So if anybody is interested in that, please leave me a note in the comments. Uh, I could actually put up the online tour of the museum and take you through it, because it's pretty bizarre. It's kind of fun to go through it because it's just so crazy. Oh, so C.O. Bill said, I hope JT at least helped that architect lady Leonard Pete. She did fine. She was not in the series. She's the woman I was talking about. She did fine. She left Scientology. She had a great career. She just had always wanted to be a novelist. She published a couple of novels. I haven't spoken with her and her husband in a while, but they're doing great. The way Scientology works, I don't even know if he knew who the designer was. I mean, they might have just handled it for him, because they do stuff like that. Okay, Artsy Tartsy says, we have heard a lot about CCHR lately, all bad. Yeah, there is I don't think I've read it yet, but there is a chapter in this book. And if you're playing the drinking game, every time I mention it, you get to take a drink. I don't know if I've read it yet. There's no, I think I did. There's a chapter in here called an industry of death, and I kind of detail the development of the whole thing. I talked a lot about CCHR, blah blah blah. Some of the stuff you guys have heard lately about CCHR it's not that it's accurate, but it doesn't do you a service. It doesn't say, hey, you're a really smart person and you should be able to handle the subtleties and the nuances of this story. So because there was some news delivered recently about that CCHR is the front group that's paying the protesters. And based on my experience, that's not actually the fact. That's a very odd way of reporting that story. It's a very irresponsible. I don't know the gentleman that they mentioned. I should go back and take some notes, but basically what happens is somebody from the private security company outed a Sea Org member. I'm pretty sure he's a Sea Org member who had, maybe he's not, I don't know, who had a card saying that he was an executive CCHR. So this is probably not true. It's true that he had a card, and it's true that it said he was like director of new development or something at CCHR. But there's more of a chance that he never has set foot in CCHR than that he has, and that he's an OSA operative, and that he works for OSA, and he's probably a CIRC member. Because let me explain this to you. It is really, really, really important for Scientology to maintain some of these front groups in very clean rooms. In other words, they don't get involved in the dirty stuff. Okay, so and the reason for this is, I'll give you an example. I remember there was a story this is a true story about a woman. She was unfortunately, I think this was in Florida, so I think they have the Baker Act down there. But she was what do they call it? She was civilly committed for 3 days for watch in a psychiatric institute. Wrongfully, as a result of that, she lost her children. Child Protective Services came and took her kids away. She couldn't get her kids back. Somebody got her connected with CCHR. They got her a lawyer. They got the kids back. So, and it's very important for them to do things like that, because they need to be able to point to these organizations, and they need to have these organizations kind of free of these sort of crimes, because that's what helps them maintain their tax exemption, because a good deal of that tax exemption is based on them being able to show that they are a benefit to the public. And when you're doing things like, sponsor organizations that are helping people out like that, plus by keeping them really clean like that, it attracts these do-gooder Scientologists who go in there and they volunteer, or they work for very little money, because they really believe that this is happening. So then what happens is Scientology it needs to pay off protesters. So it'll print up a card. It says that this guy works for CCHR, and then he'll go and pay off the protesters. That way, if something does happen and it is exposed, they're clean. They can say, no, that's not us. And they can let CCHR be a sacrificial pig for that thing. But it's just, it made it sound like, there's a smoky back room in CCHR where they're like, somebody's, taking out a suitcase full of $100 bills and going and making payoffs. And like I said, that guy's probably never even been a CCHR. And I'm not like defending CCHR. I'm just trying to define what the actual situation is. I mean, they create these cutouts. It's like the CIA does this. Like they will create legitimate companies that actually go in and they do they bring they go into war-torn areas and they bring relief and they do all kinds of good things. But, they also have some spies embedded in there and they might do a couple of assassinations and so forth. But that group is kept completely clean. People that work for it don't know it's a front group. So anyway, I've been meaning to kind of talk about that. And I know, like, what's the difference? Like, I guess maybe to me, it's important to understand all the subtleties and the nuances so that that the people that are volunteering and working at CCHR, for the most part, except maybe a couple of top execs, maybe only one, are actually really good people that think they're involved in something extremely idealistic. And we should speak about those people with compassion because they're victims, right? And the fact that this character, who's probably an OSA op, who's got this card that says he's part of CCHR. And by the way, let's make no doubt about it. Everything, I was involved in the biggest project CCHR ever did, which is the museum. And everything in that museum was coordinated with OSA. I mean, all of the research is cleared through them, all of the legal stuff, all of the videos have to go to their attorneys and be cleared to make sure that nobody's going to get sued for it. But the amazing thing is how many lies are in those that I didn't even bother to check out for myself. I just took the data and went, oh yeah, okay, cool. I'll put that in a documentary. I mean, one of the reasons I spoke out is because I kind of wanted to sleep again. And once I came out of Scientology, and I started really looking at all that stuff, and one of the things was doing my own research about everything I had spoke about or had presented in the museum. And I lost a lot of sleep over that. So I needed to actually come out and talk about that. So yeah, but anyway, it's like where blame is due, people are gonna get blamed. But as a group of people, CCHR is set up to be victimized by the church, set up to say, look, we're good people. Like they kind of wave this banner around and go, we help people. And they've done some really good things. So they're not like a dirty tricks organization. But do you understand how like insidious that is for Scientology to set that up and then kind of use it as a cutout? This guy's got a card, and so if he gets busted, they have complete deniability. Anyway, that's yeah. But I think my main objection to the way the story was being presented was there's a lot of people who work for CCHR who really think they're involved in something good, and they should be spoken about with compassion because they're victims. Let me get back to some of these comments. This says, okay, I got to back up here. Okay, let me see. What do we got here? Okay, so here's a comment from Victor Roberts. He said, I've been told if you join staff, you get the bridge for free while you were helping others to go up the bridge. But all of it were lies. None of it was true. It's just lies and deceit. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, when I went, I was never on staff, but I was treated like I was on staff. And I know part of them getting me to commit to working there for any period of time was they were like, David Miscavige sent a guy named Greg Wilher as an emissary. He came down and he said, hey, Dave wants you to know that, as long as you work here, you'll never have to pay for Scientology. I didn't get any. I mean, I never did any Scientology, hardly at all while I worked for them, even though it was free. But I got a lot of sick checks, and I got these non-elective courses, like these. You have to do this course that, like staff courses, or there was one really stupid course that I don't know who came up with it. It was in the 90s. Marty Rathman came into my office one day and said, you're going to do this course. It was called the Int Base uh, Conditions and Exchange course. And it was all about teaching the staff how gold made its money, right? Like the money flows, right? Which it all changed later anyway, but that's all I did in Scientology. I never did it. I just never did anything. I will say that now that David Miscavige no longer goes to the international base, those guys, and they no longer do events up there. Those guys, the last couple of years that I was going up there, every weekend those guys were doing bridge and getting bridge for all that kind of stuff. And there was this thing called the Universe Core, which if your org went St. Hill size, which means it was the size statistically of old St. Hill when Hubbard was running it, the Universe Corps would come and they'd deliver the bridge that gets you up to clear or something like that. But it turns out that all of the stats at St. Hill were a big lie anyway. And I never saw the Universe Corps. I heard one place that they showed up at, so I think that was all just a bunch of crap. Yeah, this paralysis, from my knowledge, dirty ops goes through local OT committees by request of DSA. I don't think that's true. I'm not, again, I don't want to sound like I'm an apologist or I'm defending them, but it's, things are very insular in Scientology. There's so many little silos, and the OT committees are there for one purpose. They're there to raise money to build OT orgs and to build ideal orgs and to maintain some to do high pressure interaction with the local public to keep them doing courses and stuff like that. Like they're not going to get involved in dirty tricks. It's because if you start spreading that toxicity out and getting those people to do those dirty tricks, the whole thing could crumble. And Miscavige knows that. So it's kind of like, it's kind of like in the mafia. You don't tell your consigliere everything because you want him to be able to walk into court and lie for you and think he's telling the truth. So it's one of the way they keep these people brainwashed. I mean, if they were having them do, I mean, I don't know. I would just like somebody to say, well, here's an example of a dirty trick that the DSA people, I mean, they do some nasty stuff in terms of reporting on people and getting people declared and stuff like that. But those are sort of following policy. That's not a dirty trick like killing someone's cat or poisoning their dog or, digging up their garden so that they think they're crazy. So I don't know about that. So I guess it's because I want to blame Miscavige for everything, because I've been in the meetings and I never saw anybody else who was in charge. I saw some people pretending to be a little bit in charge, but I never saw anybody else really making shit happen, pulling people into meetings and telling them what assholes and SPs they were, and then telling them the things that he had to do because they wouldn't do their jobs. Okay. I'm going to just real quick. So maybe I'm just not remembering those kinds of dirty tricks. And if I had an example of one, I go, oh yeah, I remember that, but I don't remember that much being dirty tricks people. Yeah. So my take on the OT committees is, they have this single purpose to. Oh, I get it. He's hungry. My dog's hungry. Hey, Weston, you want to come up here and say hi? Yeah, he's hungry. This dog eats too much. Come on up here. Come on. No. Here, you want some of this? You like lemonade? No, it's too sweet for you. Anyway, so these guys, they're part of the whole move to turn Scientology from a service-based organization into a donation-based organization. And the OT committees, they're kind of like these, what they call stakes in the Mormon church. They're sort of these local church organizations that kind of run everything on the, parishioner level. So this Victor Roberts says, if you're a resident of the U.S., you can blow from the SO and get food stamps, $300 a month plus general relief, $680 a month. Yeah, that's good. I'm sure there's. That's good to know. I don't have phone numbers for any of that, but it's good to know that there's those services. Paralyzed to Paralyzed says the local public OTs and highly committed members that have been okayed by the DSA to be there. Okay, fine. So DSA, that's the local OSA person. God, I can't remember what it stands for at the moment. Director of Special Affairs. Okay, in that local area. Yeah, and one of the reasons that Scientologists, get involved with that stuff is they kind of have to, because as they go up the bridge, they have to prove that they're being more responsible for the environment. And one of the ways you become responsible for the environment or responsible for more, or you show that you're more responsible, is you give them lots of money and you do things. Uh, yeah, no, this is actually true. I know what you're talking about. The local public OTs and highly committed members who have been okayed by the DSA to be there. Yeah, yeah, it all goes through OSA. Yeah, so Victor Roberts says OT committees are snowed in with lies. Yeah, they absolutely are. Um, yeah, okay, so here's some Paralyzed to Paralyzed. Thanks for this. He says, I don't know, maybe it's a he. I'm not, I don't have they say, I'm talking trash grabs, reporting back on disaffected members and stuff, no dead pets. Yeah, okay, I could see them absolutely doing that kind of stuff, those kind of dirty tricks, because yeah, I could, things that aren't necessarily breaking law. Stealing trash is breaking the law, but I could see them absolutely doing that. Uh, I'm sure that that's happened. Okay. About 10 time tracks ago, time tracks, in other words, 10 whatever, lifetimes ago in the multiverse, I guess, LRH created the structure, modus operandi, policies of the mafia. They are the same as in OSA. Yeah, it's a very much a mafia oriented organization. And, it's just like, okay, so the Italian mafia in New York, they have this whole romance with Christopher Columbus because he was Italian, even though in reality he was a poor sailor and a genocidal maniac. But it was the mafia that was behind the Columbus Day Parade. There's a very famous story about a mafia boss who threatened to kill Johnny Carson if NBC didn't put the Columbus Day Parade on television, and they did. Um, so, but yeah, they do food drives, they do stuff, and then they set these organizations up like the Hells Angels, which the FBI considers the most successful criminal organization in the history of America because they've never been able to infiltrate them, and for good reason. Because in order to join the Hells Angels, you have to commit a felony, usually R, in front of other group members. So, law enforcement can't get inside there, but they do one of the biggest toy drives that I've ever seen in LA around Christmas. These, mafia type criminal organizations do this stuff, and they keep that stuff really clean and legit to make themselves look legit. And that's my point about CCHR, is they try to, that David Miscavige wants to keep it as legit as possible. They find criminal psychiatrists, which you can find criminals in any field, and they pay the money to get them locked up, and they can say, hey, we got that guy locked up. He was guilty of Medicare fraud. You cost taxpayers all kinds of money, and they get points for that stuff. So I was kind of shocked to hear that some guy had a card like he was actually being fronted by CCHR. But it makes sense because they would sacrifice CCHR to avoid being connected to paying off protesters, or not paying up, but paying anti-Scientologists. Yeah, I believe he served. Miss Amber Sean says, has DM been served? Yeah, I believe he was served in, I'm trying to think, is it the Jane Doe case? What is her name? I knew her vaguely, not well. She's 40, so the Gavin Potter scandal, where he's a big time reg, kind of slick looking dude who was recruiting underage girls, and kind of, it was I can't say it because it's kind of crude, but he was doing it really because, it was fresh meat, I guess you could, to them, to get these girls in there. And anyway, he had abused. He's in that case, I think Miscavige was served, but I don't know. I don't do trials. If I hear something and nobody else has heard it, or I think I can contribute something, but there's enough other people covering trials. Okay. Well, Victor Roberts, can Scientology legally take donations? Yeah, I mean, they're tax exempt. So in the United States, there's most of the world, they're not recognized as a nonprofit. But I mean, I personally don't think what they're doing is legal, because it's like, how do you call charging somebody $1,200 an hour for counseling and taking their money in, and you call that money a donation? How is that a donation? They're getting something back for it. So I don't get how that is. Yeah, I mean, I was listening to. I remember years ago listening to NPR, and they were having some kind of giveaway, and they were having a fundraising drive, and they're a nonprofit, and they're like, give us money, and you get a perk or something. And as soon as you offer a perk, it's not a donation anymore. And they offer some pretty cool perks. They call them perks, but I don't. Yeah, there you go. There's an example of it. CEO Bill says Gotti's annual fireworks were to the mafia as a winter wonderland as a Scientology. Absolutely. And that just, they'll hand out whatever. I mean, it's like, oh my God. I just as an aside, I have to tell you, I was just so tickled pink to see the volunteer ministers get outed for misbehaving at the donation centers for the fire victims, that they were actually thought that they could collect donated material and then they had some right to redistribute it rather than just getting their own people to donate stuff. It's horrible. Yeah. Yeah. YRB said, yeah, the judge declared him, talking about Miscavige, served, as he knew enough to protest that he hadn't been served. Therefore, he knew there was a case to respond to. Yeah, that's right. He eventually just declared him served, and that was that. Thank you for that. Okay, Victor Roberts, anybody with an e-meter check, how many murders DM has ordered? Can anybody with an e-meter? Oh, can anybody with an e-meter check how many murders DM has ordered? Well, I'm not sure how you would do that with an e-meter. I guess maybe you could put Miscavige on the e-meter, but he knows as well as I do that the e-meter is just complete. It does something, but it doesn't do what they're saying it does. I don't know how many. I don't know. I said there's in my book. It's in a chapter. I'm gonna read it later. It's about Scientology Media Productions. But when I went to work there, there was a bunch of people from Flag, staff members who had been transferred to Scientology Media Productions, most notably their HCO ethics department, which were like, I don't know, somewhere between the Hitler Youth and, I don't know, they were just there was this, during World War II, the SS had this program called the Lebensborn, and the Lebensborn were the most perfect Aryans that were sort of elected to get together and breed, and the offspring were called the Lebensborn, and they were supposed to be perfect Aryans. And I think Miscavige had a way of doing this with Scientologists because he created these young ethics officers that he specially trained at Flag, and then they went to work at Scientology Media Productions, and they were a nightmare. These people were like, yeah, I think in the 2 years I was there, I think I had 2 ComEvs and like 4 courts of ethics. These people, their job was to go and find things wrong. So if they didn't find something wrong, they didn't have a statistic. They would find things wrong. They made everybody's lives miserable. They were one of the reasons that I left Scientology. But anyway, what was I saying about that? Anyway, so yeah, we were going off of oh yeah, how many murders? So anyway, but there's all these people there that had never been sort of exposed to, creating content about Scientology. And then they were hiring a bunch of pros, magazine editors, writers, journalists. And so David Miscavige, he felt this peculiar need to go through everything he'd ever been accused of with these people. So what he did was he called everybody into the auditorium for 2 days in a row, like 4 or 5 hour sessions. And he had this guy, Lynn Varney, who's not a lawyer, but he's a legally trained legal representative. He's a guy who's a long time OSA staff member who coordinates legal stuff. And then he was sitting in front of like a 4x8 folding table, and he had a bunch of like 4-inch thick binders. And in those binders were all the stories. And he went through all the stories about, Miscavige killing Shelley's mom, being accused of it, allegedly having something to do with her death and covering it up as an alive thing. I guess we still can't say that on YouTube because YouTube's such a bastion of First Amendment protection. You have to like speak in code. But anyway, so yeah, there's all these stories that he had something to do with the death of Bella and Herbert. It was on and on and on and on. And then he had he briefed everybody on why these weren't true. And he kind of wanted to get all these people sort of in line, knowing that they were working under this guy who was one of the most attacked people in the world. And he wanted a sort of safe point, which is, making somebody a safe point of contact in Scientology. All of these people that were working there, so they'll go, oh yeah, David Miscavige, man, he's a hero. He's been attacked, blah, blah, blah. But it's really just, one of the things that narcissists do is they always play the victim. So he was kind of playing a victim of all that stuff. Yeah, so Adam Carmona says Miscavige doesn't know to never read his reviews. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can tell you that he doesn't carry a phone, or he doesn't carry a computer. He doesn't really, like, occasionally he'll look at stuff, but it's really just, stuff about Tom Cruise or how wonderful the church is. He relies on people to write reports to him. He's not sitting there like he doesn't know the name Aaron Smith Levin, or he probably doesn't know who any of these people are. He knows there's some kind of, obviously he knows who Mike is. They grew up together practically, and they were good friends for a long time before Dave took over and started torturing everybody. But he doesn't read reviews, man. He doesn't care. He hates the First Amendment. I've heard him say that, the problem with the internet is you can say whatever you want with impunity, which isn't true. People do get sued for what they say, but that's how much of a First Amendment fan he is. Yeah, so C.O. Bilf says, Jesse Prince's data on Flo Barnett, that's Shelley's mom, is pretty damning for wee Dave, in my opinion. A transcript of that briefing you're describing would be worth its weight in gold. I would give anything to have just turned my phone on and recorded that thing. because it's because of that kind of information, like damning information that implicates him in all these crimes, that he held this meeting and had his top legal advisor walk everybody through it and do what we call, they de-ate it. In other words, they tried to dead agent it by covering what a bunch of crap it is. But oh my God, I would give anything to have any record of that. But I don't think they even kept one. They might have filmed it just because he might have wanted to watch it to see how Lynn Varney did, to see how he should, whether or not he should send him to the RPF. But yeah, if anybody's out there and they worked at S&P or for OSA and they have a transcript of that meeting we had that day and they want to leave, I can do what I can to see that you're amply, rewarded. Yeah, that's funny. Okay. Victor Roberts says he's hiding. I think he's referring to DM. Hiding is very low on the tone scale. It's not the lowest, but it's pretty low. I don't think he's hiding. I think he's just making himself not known to the people that want to find him. I mean, I think he's but I'm going to do a story later, specifically deals with where Miscavige is and what he's up to, at least to the best of my knowledge. Oh, hey, degraded daughter. I hope you come back and watch the whole thing on the replay because I read the chapter and it's an interesting chapter. Catching two nights in a row. Yeah, I'm gonna try to read. I intend to be reading these chapters daily until they're done. Uh, I just want them out there, and I'll finish the audiobook soon. And if anybody wants to buy that, so they don't have to listen to all this chit chat, that's perfectly fine. And if anybody honestly can't afford it, just hit me up and I'll send you it for free when I finish it, or an ebook. I think some people accuse me of just like making a money grab by writing a book. Uh, but truth be told, I've given away at least as many copies as I've sold of the ebook. I've had people write me and say, I want to read your book, but I don't have any money and I can't even afford it. And I don't have coal for the winter and whatever. I just send them a free copy because it's just like, I don't like that idea that people are, that there's, that there's, it's not just about money. I appreciate it when people buy it because it helps to support what it took to write it and publish it and all that kind of stuff. But if you really can't afford it, I'll send you it. I haven't actually announced that in a while, but if you genuinely can't afford it, if you just send me an email to Scientology The Big Lie at gmail.com, all one word, I'll send you either an EPUB or a Kindle, whichever one you prefer, or both. So that's what's happening with that. Give me a minute, because every time I end one of these, I remember a million things that I didn't put in my notes. I'm like, oh, why didn't I tell them this? Yeah, Artsy Tartsy says, you should make money if you write a book. Yeah, but I didn't write it to make money, but you're absolutely right. There's nothing wrong with making money. I don't know if you guys remember, I was going to talk about this in another stream. I was going to go back and revisit my horrific experience visiting the protest in LA when Aaron Smith Levin came to LA and made a scene and got himself detained. And sort of like, whatever, I'm not going to get into it. Aaron and I are okay. We have not always been okay, but we're okay. So, he's doing his thing and I wish him luck. So, but real quick, yeah, the reason I bring this up is because there were a number of people in this, quote unquote community, which were, I showed up at this protest and then they were streaming, they were doing content that I was like just there to sell a book. It was really disheartening. I mean, like, I was just like, whoa. So this was at the test center in LA, which people claim it got shut down. It never really got shut down. They closed the windows up and they locked the doors, covered the windows, and it was kind of like they made it a little more difficult to interact with. But here's the deal. I was really involved in what's inside the test center. I made a film to teach the staff about how to administer the test, so I know all about it. So I'm watching these protests at the test center, and I'm thinking, wow, I'm feeling like here I am sitting at home watching this. Why am I not going down there? and just calling bullshit in the thing. Like, I made all the stuff that's in there. So like, I'm like only qualified to say, hey, this is what's in there and it's bullshit. And I can tell you exactly why it's bullshit. Like, it is a con 100%. And it took me a lot to unpack how that worked and to confront how I contributed to that con. But I really wanted to do it. So, and I thought, they hand out, and a lot of you probably are aware of this, they hand out, uh, they hand out movie tickets at the test center to bring people in to watch films. Sidebar, nobody's ever gotten into Scientology through the test center. I know this because I was involved in it. It's just a way that they can claim, public presence on Hollywood Boulevard. They're all tourists. Even the few people that go through there and buy a book, they all go back to whatever, Istan, Kazakh, whatever, some other part of the world, mostly where there isn't Scientology. So they're not capturing Scientologists there. They're recruiting nobody. I don't think one person ever got into Scientology. And I'm going to be saying this again later because of that test center. Nonetheless, the protesting of it created a tremendous amount of public awareness about the fact that Scientology is a cult and that nobody should go in there. And that's a good thing. So I felt a responsibility, like I should go down there and I should call the place out. So I ordered these tickets. They hand out tickets. So I ordered my own tickets. And some of you might have seen these. They say, if you buy a book from me, I'll throw one of these in there. This basically says, rated C for cult, public warning. The content inside the Scientology Test Center is rated C for cult, inappropriate for all audiences. And then on the other side, it says Scientology The Big Lie. It says the videos inside the test center are all lies and propaganda. I know because I created most of them, and I'm here to publicly apologize and warn you to stay away. And then at the bottom, it says ScientologyTheBigLie.com. Never mentions that there's a book. Hold on, Weston. I'll take you for a walk in a minute. And but people, they still felt compelled. They couldn't help themselves. They got, Mitch Brisker is selling a book. He's just selling a book. The only reason he came down there is to sell a book. So unfortunately, I had planned this trip about 2 weeks in advance. I had to plan it in advance because I needed to get these printed. And then, it turned into a big deal. Aaron came down there. He got arrested. And so people thought I was there to make kissy face with Aaron because he and I had a falling out. And then when everybody went to the police station because that's where he was, I went down there. He came out. He gave me a big hug. Oh, Mitch, great to see you. And everybody was like, oh, look, they made up. That's not why I was there. I was happy to reconcile with him or whatever, but it's not why I was there. But anyway, I'm going to cover this a little more later because there's David Miscavige operates two primary offices on Hollywood Boulevard. Well, one on Hollywood Boulevard, one on Sunset Boulevard, both within walking distance of the test center. And he also has a residence behind one of those. And nobody ever goes there and protests. And I'm like, I want to try to organize something. I've tried in the past, and I don't want to hear, why don't you just go do it yourself? Because then you look like a nut. You look like a guy standing on Times Square with a sign that says, repent, the end is coming the world's coming to an end, Jesus saves, or whatever. So I'd like to talk about that, but right now, yeah, that's funny. Yeah, you could say that, Scientology is a DE department. Yeah, but I just want to say one thing about DEI. I don't want to get all political, but all DEI is, people don't really understand it. It's just saying, don't just look at white people for jobs. Look at other ethnic minorities, look at women, look at gay people, look at trans people, look at disabled people, see if any of them are qualified. And then what happens is some people get really mad because they find out that a woman was actually more qualified than a man, such as our fire chief in Los Angeles, who's a lesbian and is highly qualified for the job. But anyway, like the whole, what do you call it? The whole, okay, Weston, we're going to go. The whole, let me just, hold on. Oh boy. Okay, guys. So I'm going to handle my dog. We're like, I've covered more than I wanted to cover. I'm going to be back later with another stream. Thank you so much for being here. And please remember that I can't do this work without your support. So you can help support my journey to hold Scientology accountable by going to, buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Mitch Brisker. There's the link. You can look at that. You can go to mitchbrisker.com and you can buy merch or an autographed copy of my book. And if you subscribe to the channel, thank you very much. Please hit the notification bell and give me a like. It really helps the algorithm so that videos like this could get pushed out to a broader public. And I'll be back later. One more comment. Artsy Tartsy says, LOL. And I think that's a really good one to end on. So thank you all very much for being here. I'm going to take Weston, my dog, for a walk now, and we'll go out with a little tribute to him. Thank you. Oh!